partly what I'm going to say is going to upset you. And so I want you to remember that I'm just the messenger. I didn't make these things happen, but I do want to honestly tell you, if you would like a much more comfortable version of this, then just turn on your television or radio whenever you have a free moment on the toilet, and you can hear the make-believe. Unfortunately, we live in a time of decline. And then when an empire declines, which is something we haven't gone through because empires don't decline very often, but let me tell you from the history books, a little bit, we can tell it's not fun to be in a declining empire. Much more fun when the empire is going up, which was the last century or a century and a half of this country, and the ride up. We are now on the ride down. We haven't been prepared because we have leaders who cannot say a word about that. Mike, I want to just drive that home because like the split in this country is really about that. One of them to start is a little bit about, what a declining empire means. To give you the context, the United States lost the war in Vietnam. I know you don't want to believe that. But America, as they know from the comic books they read as children, only wins wars. It doesn't lose wars. But we lost. The war was fought against the Communist Party of North Vietnam, which has been running that country since the United States was driven out in 1975. Go check all of this. You'll find I'm not making it up. After we lost the war in Vietnam, we went and had a big war in Afghanistan, which we also lost. That war was against the Taliban, which now runs that country, which a good sign that you lost. We lost the war in Iraq. We are in the process of losing the war in Ukraine. But the split in the country is, if I were in certain audiences, I wouldn't dare say what I just said. They couldn't hear it. They could not hear it. Let me give you a couple of more just bits of getting what decline means together. Now, the BRICS built around China have as the population of the countries that are part of the BRICS, about 22 countries now. Altogether, they have about 55 to 60% of the population of the world are members. What is the percentage of the world's population of the United States? What? 4.5%? You understand? We are 4.5%. They're 50 to 60%. 15 years ago, every automobile company on this planet went to work trying to develop what they understood was the next wave in that business, which was putting aside the gasoline-powered car and substituting an electric-operated car or truck. By the way, not a rational response, because it's terribly wasteful to have that vehicle, which, those of you who haven't noticed, sits on the street or in the garage most of its life. That's kind of, let's use a fundamental word, stupid. It's stupid. It's a waste of resources. That car could serve 20 people each day if it were managed properly. What do I mean managed properly? Well, like a car rental business. That's how they would manage that. Or those bicycles we can now just take off the rack and put back on. That's a rational way. If you want to avoid killing people, which private cars do, if you want to avoid air pollution, cars are the major cause of it, and on and on. Rationale would be to go from the private car to a mass transit efficient system. A beautiful train every 5 minutes, a beautiful bus, even more beautiful, every 3 minutes, everywhere. That's it. Infinitely cheaper, much more efficient, and none of you have to worry about it because wherever it's parked in the central lots, which we call car rental centers, there would be paid mechanics who make sure they're in proper condition. So the car would be in better shape, better cared for. The whole thing is nuts. And who is the person who invented this crazy bad solution to the fuel-burning car? That genius who did this terrible thing, Elon Musk. That's what he did. He found a way that automobile companies could make a profit by taking us out of gas cars into electric cars. So 15 years ago, all the electric car companies said, hooray, here's how we hold on to our profits by making these private cars for everybody. And they all went to work to compete, and there was a winner. As of 3 years ago, one company figured out how to make the best quality electric cars and trucks and had the lowest price, which is what competition is supposed to result. And I'm sure you all know the name of this company. It's BYD Corporation. Let me do that again. B as in boy, Y as in yellow, D as in dog. BYD. Now I can imagine your faces right now. You never heard of this place or this thing. What is it? Well, what did I just tell you? They won the competition for the entire new wave of cars and trucks moving across this planet every day by the millions. And you never heard of them. Why? Because they sell everywhere except here in the USA. If you go to Europe right now, you'll see them all over the roads. BYD. BYD is a Chinese company. And by the way, there's several Chinese car companies. They're not the only one. They're just the ones who did it best. Why don't you see them? And because we have a tariff started by Mr. Trump. The tariff on the Chinese electric vehicles is 100%. So let me explain quickly what that means. The Chinese produce this wonderful thing, electric vehicle, and let's take a simple number. $30,000 is what they cost for the car. You're an American. You need, therefore, to come up with $30,000 if, for example, you're a company that uses electric trucks to do part of your business. It's an input. You'd have to come up with $30,000 to get the truck, and then you'd have to pay 100%. Another $30,000 will go into Uncle Sam. Uncle Sam, who put the tariff. Tariff is just a word for a tax. It's a word for a tax on an imported good or service, something that produced out of the country, but brought in here for sale. That's what an import is, and tariff is the name of the tax you put on imports. We have been putting taxes on imports as a nation from the beginning. Although throughout the history, it's nothing new, but it's 100%, which means an American would have to buy that truck by giving China $30,000 for the truck and Uncle Sam another $30,000. And so with $60,000, you get the truck. But of course, no one does that. Why? Because Ford and General Motors and Tesla will sell you an electric car or truck for a mere $40,000 or $50,000 or something like that. So who's helped by this? Ford and General Motors. They wouldn't be able to sell their crappy cars otherwise. We would none of us buy a $40,000 or $50,000 electric car if we're going to do that and give BYD $30,000 for a better car rather than $40,000 or $50,000 to General Motors, however patriotic we might feel. And you know who knows it? Ford and General Motors. So they went to the president and they said, put that tariff there. It'll protect us. Of course, they didn't say our profits, which is the truth. It'll protect jobs. Whenever you hear capitalists tell you about what they're doing to protect jobs, hold on to your wallet. Someone's reaching. Why is it false? Because this is a terrible act for most American producers. Think of yourself as a maker of shirts or of chairs or of software programs. You would like to buy the trucks you need to bring in your inputs to sell and distribute your outputs. You're going to have to buy electric trucks. You'd like to buy the best one at the lowest price. Of course, you're competing with enterprises in France and in Germany and in Brazil and in Nigeria and fill in the blank. They're all buying BYD cars at $30,000. You have to pay $40,000 or $50,000 to General Motors. You know what that means? They're going to defeat you economically. You're going to be loser. And when you lose, you're going to lay off your workers because you can't compete with the companies that can buy the biggest, the best, and the cheapest electric vehicle. Now, multiply this by dozens of other commodities. China's winning. We are losing. Don't tell anyone, because you live in a country which is pretending to itself that none of this is going on. It's either never discussed or we turn it around and we say the Chinese are becoming aggressive in the world. They're doing what exactly we did. You know how United States became a big, powerful country? By doing to Europe what the Chinese are doing to us. It's not new. It's not different. The only question is, why would it be surprising? Well, what a strange behavior is going on here. There's a name for companies that have been for several years so deeply in debt that they don't make enough profit to service their debt. That is to pay the interest and the portion they have to repay. And we have a special name in economics for them. I kid you not. I didn't make this up. Zombie corporations. Because they're dead. They're economically defunct. You know how they manage to survive when their profits aren't enough to cover their debts? They take on more debt to pay the debt they couldn't otherwise cover. That makes them more zombie-ish next year than they were this year, which is what's happening. You might wonder who lends money to all these indebted people, businesses, and government. Well, let me start with the government, because if you thought the world was crazy before, wait till you get this. The two biggest creditors of the United States government are Japan and China. Japan number one, China number two. A few years ago, it was the other way. China was number one. Japan was number two. United States is the biggest debtor country in the world by countries. The second biggest creditor of the United States is also the biggest debtor, is the People's Republic of China. Do you understand? The United States owes China $850 billion, roughly. It has to pay interest on that debt, like it has to pay on others, which means I'm here to tell you that a portion of the taxes every one of you watching this video pays when you buy a bottle of beer, or you smoke a cigarette, or you pay your taxes, a portion of that money, you should be very pleased, is collected by the United States government, not used for houses or medical care or student loans, but shipped to China as interest on the debt to enable them to build their military capacity to fight the United States. Hello? I didn't make this up. On the other hand, think of it this way. These kinds of loans from Japan, from China, enable the United States government to spend all the money Dr. Leon told us about in Ukraine without having to tax us. Because do you know what would bring the war in Ukraine to an end in about 10, maybe 11 seconds? If Americans had to pay for it. But we don't. the Chinese and the Russians. And China, by the way, supports Russia against Ukraine, but lends government money to the United States, which pays for the Ukrainians. Whoa, you think you ought to pay respect to a system working like this? Think we are in a completely different world than we once were. The empire is declining. We are not strong. We are weak. Here's how it works. Every empire as it goes down has the following procedure of handling it. The people at the top, the rich and the powerful, respond to the decline by saying, "Oh, this is terrible, but not for me." The top always offloads the difficulties and burdens of a decline onto those people less powerful and less rich than themselves. The emperor in Rome didn't suffer the way the average people did. The emperor in Persia or the emperor in Greece, it doesn't matter. All the empires show the same phenomena. Those at the top hold on, work harder than they used to hold on, because they know damn well it's going down. And who can't do that are the people who don't have much power and the people who don't have much wealth. So the working class has to be, one way or another, squeezed as you go down. And we, you, me, we're all being squeezed. And in our naivete, we turn to the Republican and Democratic Party to protect us. They can't. Oh, they'll tell you whatever you want to hear. You know that. We live in that. But they can't do anything because the only real thing to do would be to say honestly to the people, our empire is going down. It's going to be a hard thing. And maybe we all ought to get together to try to get through this difficulty together. Oh, that would be an interesting idea. Would have a name like, I don't know, socialism? That would be rational. We don't live rational. How do you squeeze the mass of people? A lot of ways. It's a little bit like that famous poem, how do I love thee? Let me count the ways. How am I going to screw the working class? Let me count the ways. So for 40 or 50 years, we make sure that unions can't function. They can't do what they were invented to do, help the workers get a better deal. Not going to get that. We're going to demonize unions. We're going to make every union look like it's that movie On the Waterfront, a bunch of crooks that are grabbing your dues every week. You've been living your life in that kind of an environment. It's changed the last few years as working people begin to get it. The Starbucks workers and the Amazon workers are beginning to get it. Like the labor movement is kind of coming back to life, but it's coming late in the process of squeezing the working class. Here's another way you squeeze the working class. You have this thing which you say is some kind of mystery. It's called inflation. What an inflation sounds like something you do to a balloon. What is inflation in economics just means prices are going up. But now, let's be a little bit more careful. If you know anything about the inflation of the last few years, here's a little statistic. The inflation has gone up faster than average wages and salaries of people. Okay, now I'm going to do this very difficult arithmetic. If the money you have to spend and your wages and salaries are not going up as fast as the prices, they're going to be things you can't afford anymore. Really special expensive things like eggs. The inflation in eggs is due to bird flu. I'm not going to be mean, but half of you believe that, and the other half of you think it might be true. Here's what inflation is. It's a decision made by some people to jack up the price you have to pay for the things they can control the prices of. Who sets prices in a capitalist economy? Answer: the employer. Whoa! So much more to say. I will do a part 2 to this. Please like and subscribe and stay tuned for part 2.